who we think we are is very different from how we actually behave. And what somebody believes their values to be is different from their actions. And so how do we decrease that gap between these are my values and this is how I act?
I'm Autumn Brown, front woman of the soul pop band Autumn, a queer science fiction writer, a theologian, a mother of dragons, and a healing justice facilitator for social movements living on Dakota and Anishinaabe land currently known as Minneapolis.
And I'm Adrienne Marie Brown, a luscious Black queer witch writer auntie, an apocalyptic cosmic optimist, and a gardener of healing ideas. I live in the land of the Shakori, Skurure, Tuscarora, and Lumbee peoples currently known as Durham, North Carolina.
And this is How to Survive the End of the World,
our podcast about learning from apocalypse with grace, rigor, and curiosity.
As a reminder, we have no ads. We are fully listener supported.
So join our Patreon for exclusive content and to be in more conversation with us about culture and deeper dives into everything we're talking about on this podcast.
Literally everything.
Everything.
Okay. Today, we are so excited to introduce a really, really cool guest, Dr. Sunita Saw. We're going to be in conversation with Dr. Saw about her brand new book, Defy, which could not be more on time at this time. So I'm going to do a quick read of Dr. Saw's bio, and then we're going to get into our check-ins, and y'all will get to learn so much more about her. So Dr. Sunita Saw investigates what makes us comply. She is an award-winning, tenured professor and organizational psychologist at Cornell University, who has conducted groundbreaking research on defiance, advice, and influence. A trained physician, she practiced medicine in the United Kingdom and worked as a management consultant for the pharmaceutical industry. She currently teaches executives, leaders, and students in healthcare and business. Her multidisciplinary research and analyses have been widely published in leading academic journals and media, including the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Harvard Business Review, and Scientific American. This year, she released this fascinating book called Defy, and we are so excited to get to be in conversation with her about it today. Dr. Saw, welcome to How to Survive the End of the World.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm so excited for this conversation.
Oh, man, We're excited too. So we're going to start with our check-in.
Yes.
We always ask ourselves, we ask each other, and we ask our guests, how are you today, right now? Adrienne, do you want to go first and kind of model how we answer the question?
Sure.
Your hair looks great, by the way, sister.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really happy with what's been happening with my hair lately. I feel like in the long and short hair of it all, we all know that you can go through some very awkward phases when you're in that in-between. And I feel like I've been in a long, awkward phase between my last short haircut and this endeavor to get some length and some volume. So I just am coming off of having been on vacation. Each year I go for spring break with two of my besties and one of their kids. And we just go together we just spring break together. And each year it's become something that I'm like, oh yeah, I really look forward to this. Like the way that a kid, I'm like, we work hard. We all need spring break, summer break, fall break, and winter break. Like we all need it. Mm-hmm. And so I just got to spend a couple of days with these beloveds, reading nonstop on the beach. And I want to tell you, literally we would sit on the beach, all four of us, the three adults and the kid, reading our books, listening to the ocean waves come in and out and with the sun on us. And then occasionally one of us would be like, do we need a drink? And we had these little non-alcoholic mocktail beverages that we would pour that are with adaptogens and they still feel kind of fancy. And we really, worked hard to kind of keep the news at bay while also having deep and meaningful conversations with each other and just staggering I keep thinking of this act as staggering. Like I'm like, we're in the long haul of some major periods of change and rebellion, and we need to like stagger. And I feel so deeply rested, like up into the marrow of my bones. Like I really actually rested. Wow. And now I'm like, okay, I'm back in, and I'm like, I'm ready to go. So that's my energy today. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah. How about you, Dr. Sa?
So please call me Sunita.
Okay, I was hoping you'd say that. I'm hoping you say that, but I didn't want to make any assumptions. How about you, Sunita? Now we're friends.
Yes, absolutely. I wondered how long that was going to last. I was like, surely you're going to switch.
Well, sometimes when people have done the work to become doctor, they're just like, you're going to always call me doctor. Even some of my friends are like, you're going to call me Dr. J. And I'm like, okay, cool.
Right.
I wish I was well rested. I wish I was well rested.
I wish that for you.
I'm the opposite of that today. So on the one hand, as I said, I'm so excited to be here for this conversation. And that is a lovely aspect of my day. At the same time, we received great news last night about my son. He's been navigating a lot of things this year, and we received some wonderful news. And yet that's what kept me up. So I was so excited. I felt like I had to process, and I still don't feel I've processed. He's at school today, and I can't wait for him to come home and for us to just sit and process a little bit more. So that's really, really exciting too. Wow. But certainly well rested is not up there. I have been teaching on Roosevelt Island in Manhattan and juggling quite a few things. So I occasionally go through a period of time where I was like, oh, there's so much going on, and I just need like a day to organize everything. But I would also love to have a week on the beach in the warmth and the sun with my family and just do nothing. And I don't know when that's going to happen, but I can dream. I can definitely dream.
We're planting the seed.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And how about you, sister?
Oh, man. Yeah, I feel living vicariously through your ocean time. And I have another friend who's on a big family trip to Italy right now. That was like years in the making. And I also feel like in a way I'm kind of living vicariously through her, you know, that sort of like, oh, I can access this. I'm about to go on a spring break trip with my children to the South. And part of the trip is going to be college touring with my oldest, which feels both momentous and very tender. And he and I have just been having some conversations across this last week where I'm really feeling his maturity and how he really is arcing into adulthood. And yeah, I'm feeling very tender this week about like just the change, time passing, how time passing is so medicinal, and how much healing has happened in our family system, how much healing we still get to do in our family system. So yeah, I'm ending this week both like ready for a break, ready to be out of here, and also kind of tenderoni about the things that have been happening in our family system recently. Yeah. But in a positive way, that's sort of the tenderness of, wow, healing is happening, and it's really incredible that it is even possible. It gives me hope for the world. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like when you go through a dark time in your family and then things change, it's like, oh, actually, this lets me know that this is possible. Yeah. This is possible across, you know, family is a microcosm of everything else. And so as we go through this really dark time in the world, pale time.
I was about to say, girl, I was like, pale time. It's a pale time.
Pale time. It's a pale time in the world. As we go through this pale time in the world, I feel I'm letting myself just remember hope.
I really love that, sister. You know, and the pale time, I love this. I do want this to be like a show, a practice we do on the show where we really are like transferring that from darkness to paleness.
Darkness to paleness.
And thinking of it as winter. right? Like I'm just like, when we go through a winter where everything dies off and everything's cold and all the color bleaches out, and then what you're experiencing right now, talking to you the past couple of days, it's like little shoots of green popping back up and being like, oh, it takes time, but that growth always does return. That's our earthling way.
Yeah.
So I love that. So we're all exactly where we are. There's some good news. There's life, there's all the things.
And it's so,
and Sunita,
it's so interesting that you were saying the college visits, because that's what we've been navigating the last year. And yes, we received news last night about where he's most likely to go. And that's like, just imagining the future, imagining him leaving. There's a lot of feelings with that, it's
oh my gosh. I just got chills when you said that, Sunita. I'm just like, oh, you're a year ahead of me in this process. And I'm just I could cry about it right now. I feel so emotional. I feel excited for him, but I feel so emotional about what it means.
Yeah. It's becoming real. Yeah. It's becoming real. So,
Sunita, how many children do you have?
I have one. So yes, he's my one.
Oh wow,
this is it. This is it. And then life. Wow. I don't know how it's going to feel. It's
that's right. It's a massive change.
It's huge, and
because there is such a huge part of parenting where it's like you start off on this journey, and this is the intense part. Like watching all my friends who have become parents, where I'm like, there's this 18 years or whatever, where it's like, okay, you're with me. I've got my eyes on you. You're right here. And I'm excited for you both as you turn to face this next stage where it's like, okay, now you've got to fly out of this nest.
Yes.
And I've got to trust that you know how to find worms.
Yes.
And know how to and know how to do your laundry.
It's so funny. The food specifically, because Finn is quite the cook.
Oh, that's great.
And for his birthday, not last year, but the year before, he asked for and got as a gift from me this really fancy saute pan called a Hexclad. Mm-hmm. And just a couple of days ago, he said to me, I just want to make sure it's going to be fine with you for me to take that with me when I go off to college. And I was like, only if you have a kitchen. Exactly. Like I got really defensive about it. Until you have a kitchen, I'm not letting you take it.
It's the little control things, right?
And exactly.
There it is. Okay, I hope he defies you. So now, before we talk about Defiance, before we get deep into Defiance, we wanted to start off with just a moment for compliance, right? To really set up this, what is the norm that we're all swimming in, the water that we're all swimming in, and we wanted to hear from you, from your research. What did you uncover about the nature of compliance, and particularly what happens to us when we comply despite knowing that what we're being asked to do is wrong, what we're being ordered to do is wrong, and what is the long-term impact of that kind of compliance?
Yes. Well, for a long time, I was very compliant. I was raised to be very compliant. And this was why I was fascinated with it. My name, Sunita, actually in Sanskrit means good. And the messages I received as a child, I mostly lived up to that. But good meant doing what you are told. I went to school on time, and we were talking about how lovely your hair is. I even had my hair cut the way my parents wanted me to. I was very compliant. And these were the messages I received all the time, not just from parents, but from teachers and the community. It was to fit in, be good, obey, do as you're told, don't question. And I became so socialized to comply. But I was really always so fascinated by people who could defy and just could be who they wanted to be. And I would study them a lot, even when I was young and growing up. And then I ended up now doing a lot of work on compliance, and it started with why we follow bad advice. So my first career was in medicine. So I did what was expected and complied with being a doctor. I went to medical school just as my parents wanted me to. But in the third year of medical school, I did, in the UK, they have a combined undergraduate and graduate degree. So you can do an intercalated degree. So in the third year, I went and I spent that year with the fourth year psychology students to earn a degree of 4 years in 1 year. But I was fascinated with that year and fascinated by the things they told us. And I just loved it. I remember one of the professors there talking about how much we comply in terms of, if we just look at the social norms, like how many of the women in the room have long hair, how many of the men have short hair, just like things like that. And it was then I read about the Milgram experiments, obedience to authority, and that fascinated me.
It's such a frightening experiment.
It's so frightening that we will just follow somebody's orders to harm somebody else because they tell us to. And when it came to my own research, it started off in the medical context, but it went into all other different contexts and just into personal. I saw how compliant people can be. So even when it's really obvious this is bad advice or the wrong thing to do, the level of compliance was really high. And what I noticed both in my participants and the way that Milgram had described his participants is that even though they were complying, Stanley Milgram, he put people very neatly into an obedient box and a defiant box. So you were obedient if you carried on giving the electric shocks all the way to 450 volts, which was marked XXX danger, severe shock, which could be harmful or even kill a human being. He called those subjects that went up to that full level obedient subjects, and those that resisted and said no, the defiant ones. So already we see in defiant as being something positive. But he also noticed that the people that were being obedient, they had some kind of nervous laughter, smile, tension. And that tension is what I still feel in situations where we're expected to do something, but we want to do something else. Like, we know what the right thing is to do, but somebody is expecting us to do something else, whether it's an order, a suggestion, or even an expectation from society. We have that tension. And sometimes, a lot of times, compliant people will just try to disregard it and try to sweep it away or think it's not worth our doubt. And yet that's the power. We think about tension as being something, weak. And yet that's the thing that can give us strength. And it gives us really a warning sign, a signal that now might be the time to defy. And for many of us, we've been feeling a lot of anxiety and tension right now. There's like a background almost of this sort of anxiety and tension. And what can we do with it? What can we do with it? I mean, just earlier today, I received a message on LinkedIn where somebody said exactly that. Oh, I read your book and I'm feeling this tension about what's going on. But I'm trying to channel it into something really constructive. So we can use that feeling that we have, the uncomfortable feeling, to help us move through sort of the stages of defiance.
Yeah.
Interesting. So part of the experience of compliance is the experience of this tension, and often just overriding the tension.
Yes, I mean, with compliance, which I define as just going along with something, whether it's something external, it's not coming from within. That compliance can be actually without tension. You can just slide into it without thinking. It's when you want to defy, like when we start thinking about what is it that we actually want, when we start connecting with our values, that's when the tension comes in. So for many people, we might comply automatically without thinking about it. At that point, you don't have tension. And so the tension is great, because if you don't have that tension, you are actually giving all your power, all your agency to someone else, right? You're just saying, okay, that's fine. But for a lot of us, we do have that tension, and that tension actually signals your agency. It means you haven't given everything away.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so I just heard you reference your definition of compliance. And I noticed when I was reading the beginning of the book that you came up with a new definition of defiance for the purposes of the book. And I'm wondering I would love for you to talk our listeners through, like, how is defiance defined? And then how did you redefine it for the project? And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about why it felt important to you to give this word a new definition.
Absolutely. So to really understand that, when we think about, like I just said, that for many people, we are socialized to think of compliance as being good and defiance as being bad. But when I delved into it with my own research, looking at other research, for example, one study found that 9 out of 10 healthcare workers, most of them nurses, don't feel comfortable speaking up when they see a colleague, a physician making an error. And that's a situation where we do want people to speak up. And that is when, like situations like that, I always feel tension, and I start to wonder, is it sometimes bad to be good? And what do we actually sacrifice by being so compliant? And even if it's not a life and death situation, like, the healthcare workers, when we're quiet or silent, when something is wrong, it can be soul destroying. And I often felt drained and muted, and that tension inspired my work and research. And now that I've spent decades studying this, what I found that really substantially changed how I think is that we've just simply misunderstood what it means to defy. Because if we think of defiance as bad, and the Oxford English Dictionary definition of defiance is that to defy is to challenge the power of another person, to resist boldly and openly. Sometimes that can be it's quite a powerful definition, and it conjures up all these images of defiance being loud and public and confrontational. And I'm not one to really disagree with the Oxford English Dictionary, having grown up in the UK, but I do think it's too narrow, and it doesn't actually honor our agency. And my definition of defiance is that to defy is to act in accordance with your true values when there is pressure to do otherwise. So we reframe this defiance, or redefine it as a proactive positive force, not the negative connotation that we have. It's a proactive positive force in society. So, because if you think about it, the nurse is not speaking up, other people not speaking up. When you see something wrong, every individual act that we do, every act of compliance, of consent, of dissent, that creates the society that we live in. And so it really is affecting our lives, our community, our workplaces. And that's why it's really important to understand what we mean by defiance. And for many of us, get rid of that negative feeling. When I talk about defiance and I even explain it to people, they often still go back to sort of viewing this as something negative, and they find it really difficult to see themselves as being defiant and doing positive things.
Yeah, I really love that. I love the complexity of that, because in a time like this, where it's like, we can see we can see how important it is that people are defying things that are harmful. And yet the culture is still such it's like, we're still, we're on this precipice where, like, when someone does defy, it's easy to pull them out of the crowd and be like, this person bad, we're going to deport them. We're going to remove them from power. We're going to get everyone to glom onto them. And so we want to talk, the next question we have is like, what makes defiance possible? What makes it more likely to take place? But before you dive into that, I often pull a tarot card as we're starting a conversation. And I have to read the one that I pulled for this conversation with you. So it's the 7 of Fire. And fire is like the alchemy in the deck. Fire is how change actually happens. And this card, the description says, challenge is a part of the life cycle. How we face it determines whether it grows us or stalls us. With this card, you are being invited to meet challenge with your values intact. Feel the heat of courage in your belly and let it move you toward valor. How do you face each inevitable challenge? And it felt like there were some real clues in that card about this
That's amazing
work of defiance. Yeah, I was just like, oh, wow. Okay. So, and I felt this as I was reading through your text too, that there was so much about courage, but I'm like, yeah, how do you see us cultivate courage, and what makes that defiance actually possible when we're in that moment and we feel the tension? And
yeah, I mean, there's so many things. So let me start with why we often resist defiance. And there's 3 key reasons for why that happens. One is this enormous pressure, this social pressure to go along with other people. And I've found that quite a powerful force. That is one of the forces that has kept me silent and compliant many times, is the social pressure when somebody else is expecting something of you. And the second reason is we don't really understand what compliance and defiance are, and we've spoken a little bit about the definitions and thinking about it as a negative thing. And we do see compliance, that moral equation of compliance being good and defiance being bad. It's really hard to break, for some people. And so understanding that is really important, that mindset shift, of really understanding what do we mean here and connecting with our values. So that's the key aspect, is knowing who we are, what our values are, and connecting with it and taking responsibility. The third reason why we resist defiance is that even when we want to decide, we decide to defy. For many of us, we don't know how. We've never built up the skill set, and we don't have the ability or the confidence to do it. And that's when that tension is really strong. Like, we want to do it, but we just don't know how to do it. We're not practiced, we're not trained. We've been trained so much in compliance, that comes naturally to us. But who's trained us in defiance?
Right. It almost seems like a personality trait, like when I think about how people will look at like a Greta Thunberg or someone like that, and they'll be like, oh my goodness. And it's like, yeah, you're thinking about Greta as just having this different personality where she just knows, rather than thinking about like, oh, there's something in her that is able to feel that tension and meet it with action.
Yes. And I think that's one of the biggest myths about what we need to defy, is that you need to have a particular type of personality, that you need to be like loud or bold or violent or aggressive. Or on the other hand, if you think of defiance as positive, you need to be heroic or superhuman. And none of those things actually are true. You just have to connect with your values and act in alignment with them when there's pressure to do otherwise. So you don't actually, I say you don't need to even feel brave, because that is a hurdle that some people, they have this self-concept, oh, I'm not that type of person. And you don't have to be a superhero. You don't have to have a strong personality. You don't have to be larger than life. It's not just for the brave and the extraordinary. It's for all of us. And it's really available for all of us and necessary, because it's a practice, not a personality. It's a skill set. And we can all choose to nurture it, cultivate it, practice it, and use it. It's a decision. Can we use it or not?
I have a question. Well, right now it's coming up as a thought, but I feel like there's a question there about values, because I'm hearing you say this piece around like, you don't have to be a superhero. You just need to be able to connect to your values and act in alignment with them. So for years in my career, I did a lot of organizational development work with movement building organizations doing social justice work and social change. And it's pretty standard in my field to take people through values exercises, to defining our values as a group. And there came a point, I'm just being real, there came a point in my career where I stopped really wanting to do that type of work with people because it felt really hollow. And I would tell groups, I got to this point where I started to tell groups, whatever we're coming up with today, just want everyone to know that it's aspirational, and you'll only know if it's actually a shared value amongst you and once it's tested.
Yeah.
Because I got to this point where I felt like if your values aren't tested, they aren't actually values. Right. They're just ideas. So groups would come together and say, we value compassion. We value honesty. We value vision. We value care, like whatever the thing was.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, but once it's tested, then you'll see as a group whether you actually do value those things or whether you value something else like efficiency or conflict avoidance.
Right.
Or, you know what I mean? Like, I think that I often found that groups weren't really willing to be honest with themselves about what the actual kind of value set of the group is.
Yeah.
And so I struggled. I think I in part stopped finding it fruitful to do that work because I struggled to trust what was coming through the exercises. And so I wonder about, I guess the question is like, how do you support people to actually connect to their values so that they can begin that process of aligning their behavior with their values?
Yeah, this is such a great point because one of the biggest things that my research has shown, other people's research has shown, is that who we think we are is very different from how we actually behave. And what somebody believes their values to be is different from their actions. And so how do we decrease that gap between these are my values and this is how I act? And I introduce what I call the Defiance compass, where the first step is really about there's 3 questions you want to ask. So the first one is, who am I? And that really is about values. So I hear what you're saying about sort of the values exercises, particularly within organizations, because for many of us who have worked at different institutions, we'll probably say, yes, we're saying we value this, but our daily actions don't show that we value this. But it's also true of individuals. And so, for example, what I do with my executive students is a couple of things. Is first of all, I ask them, while they're in the classroom, I ask them, okay, let's think about our values and things. Like let's start off with integrity, because people rate this value so high. It's very important to them. They don't want to be known as being untrustworthy. They've got high character. Integrity is really important to them. And we can demonstrate this so easily because I ask them, on a scale of 0 to 100, rate your level of honesty relative to other people in the room. So if you think you're the most honest person, it should be 100. If you think you're the least honest, it should be 0. And if you think you're about average, it would be 50. And then I asked for brave people to tell me how they rated themselves. What do you think? What do you think they are rating themselves as?
Oh, I think they're all in the like 80 up.
Yeah, absolutely. Year after year, it's like 85, 90. Like nobody, is going along with 50. And who's going to say below 50, right? But half the people need to be below 50 and half need to be above if 50 is the average. But it's like, no, I'm really, I'm one of the most honest people in this room. So everybody is the most honest person in the room, right? And that can't be. And yet, then I show them some data of what starts at a very young age. I mean, we were just talking about children and high school children, and there's a survey of over 20,000 high school students that showed that nearly 2/3 report cheating on a test. Nearly 1/3 admitted to stealing something from a store in the past year.
Oh my God.
That shocked me. But then this one, more than 80% said that they had lied to their parent about something significant, which is heartbreaking, right? When you have
It's like,
what have you lied to me about? Tell me. And these figures are likely to be conservative because at least 1 in 4 said that they had lied about at least one of the questions on the survey. So, and then what we find is this isn't unique to high school students. Our actions are not aligned with our behavior. Who we think we are is not aligned with how we're acting. And so we can come up with these values of integrity, fairness, justice, compassion, empathy, equality. And my students do, right? They're the values that they put down, and they're very strong values. They're powerful. It's one word. You can't boil it down. any further. And it seems to be quite universal. I see these values again and again and again. And yet, the other questions on the Defiance compass, when we're starting with who am I, these are my values, then you need to ask what type of situation is this. So you are looking external, and we can come back to that. But the third question is, what does a person like me do in a situation like this? And this is where we're getting to the aspirational self. What does a person like me with these values of fairness, of equality, what do I do in a situation like this? Now you start asking yourself the question, the answer becomes a little clearer, because what you do then leads back to who you are. Because you cannot keep doing the wrong thing and then saying, I don't know if you've ever heard people saying, this isn't me, that wasn't me, I did that, but that was.
Oh, yes.
And that statement, I've been fascinated by it for so long. That's like, why? Yeah. But if you keep doing that over and over again, surely that is you,
Surely that is you.
So
it might be you.
So here I am doing a thing again that, I'm saying isn't me, that's not who I am. But if you do it over and over again, that is you. So then you have to ask, what does a person like me with these values do in a situation like this? And that is something I've found very helpful to decrease that gap between intention and behavior, because it's bringing us out of ourselves. It's almost talking to ourselves in the third person. What is it that I aspire to do? And that gives you some of that, needed strength to follow through. Yeah. This is who I want to be. This is what I want to do, rather than rationalizing, oh, it's too difficult, or the social pressure taking over. It's just stepping back and asking yourself that question.
I really appreciate this, Sunita, because, one of the things that came up for me, I kept thinking about January 6th and these people who are like, I'm defiantly racist, or I'm defiantly like, I defiantly want to be able to say language that people have just said is we don't say that anymore. It's not good to say that language anymore. And people are like, I'm defiantly going to use that language. And so there's something in what you said, right, which is clear. It's like, what does a person like me want to do in a moment like this? And I'm like, in this way, there's a neutrality to defiance that is important to just be able to name, which is, right, like you can be in a society that has decided like, hey, we're no longer going to use racial slurs. And that's what's good. And that's what we're asking everyone to go along with. And then there can be someone who's like, well, a person like me is racist and I want to use those slurs. And I don't want people to think I'm a bad person because I use those slurs. That's the kicker, right? A lot of times people are like, I'm not bad. I just see things this way or whatever, right? Anyway, it just brings up all this for me where I'm like, it's really personal. Like what you feel defiant about. So to be clarified, right? Yes. It's like, what is a person like me? I'm like, well, I'm not racist, but I'm also not willing to throw everyone away. It's like, I'm not willing to throw away everyone who has ever expressed a racist thing.
Right.
Like the defiance I feel inside me, the place that I often feel moved to action is to be like, wait, hold on to each other. Right. So it's like, but it's personal. Yeah. It allows it to get so deeply personal.
I mean, there's two things there that you're saying. One is what are our values? Can you have like a bad value in terms of, oh, I define myself as a racist person? I think very few people do that, right? They really do.
Very few people Most do, people exactly. They're like, I'm good, I just don't like Black people. Yeah.
Most people have a self-concept of them being a good person.
Good.
And then the second, the second thing, which is a different aspect, is like, if somebody does that, how do we treat them? Like, do we cut them out? That's a separate aspect of, but if you're thinking about yourself and you see yourself as a good person with integrity, and most people will say they are not racist, then, some of the defiant actions, you spoke about January the 6th, and I write about Clayton Ray Mullins, who was, people believed him to be quite fair and mild-minded, and yet he ended up being part of sort of the violent crowd that day, even though he was not particularly political and he thought the election was actually fair. So this is a situation, yes, there might have been people on that day going along with everything and the crowd because they really believed democracy was their value and they felt the election was not fair. But there were also people that didn't believe that. And there could be a lot of reasons for that, getting swept along with the crowd, conforming to the crowd. But those actions often look defiant. And it's the same like on social media when we sort of say something and we're more interested in how much attention we get or the likes that we get. And people can do that. And even like we're speaking about our children and teenagers, often they do the exact opposite of what we want them to do or what we ask them to do. What this shows is that actually that defiance, if you go along with my definition, is to defy in accordance with your true values. That's something that's coming from within. But if you're going along with a crowd or you're doing something for performative reasons or you're doing the exact opposite of what I tell you, that's what I call false defiance because it's, again, externally imposed. It's not coming from within.
Yeah. I love this. This feels really important because I feel like what I kept teasing out through your book was the relationship between defiance and belonging.
Right.
Right. And it was there's this external pressure to belong to something, whether or not it actually aligns with who you feel yourself to be. And then there's these acts of defiance that seem like they jeopardize your belonging, but in some ways they make you belong to yourself more deeply. And by belonging to yourself more deeply, then you can find the people you truly belong to.
Yes.
So this is very helpful.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it because, sometimes that false defiance, like putting a sign on your lawn, but if everybody else is doing it, is it something you really believe? Or is it because you want to belong with everybody else?
And will you stand up for it under pressure?
Looks more like conformity to me than defiance. And so, yes, we need to be ready not to fall for that false defiance.
Yeah. I just want to shine a bright light on this because we've been having all these talks about our movement space and how our movement space moves and how we hold on to each other or don't hold on to each other. And what do we truly believe? And have we thought it through for ourselves or have we just been told this is what the left believes? This is where the left takes a stand or whatever. And I find that, when we can also get caught up in this false defiance and sort of false sense of belonging to shared values. And it's only what happens under the pressure of okay, so right now, people's families are being snatched off the street. You said that you believed in this. Are you willing to take defiant action for it?
Yeah.
Right. And can you take that false defiance and make it real? I just want to shine the light on that for our particular listenership because I'm this is, when I think about how do we survive the end of the world, it's when those things that we're willing to espouse together, when we've really thought them through and internalized them and been no, this truly deeply is my value and I'll take action on it.
Right.
And
that's,
there's something really important there.
And that's why it's really important. When I do go through values with my students, I do actually have them write them down because the research shows if you write them down, you have more clarity and you're more likely to act in alignment with them when you have more clarity. And you actually have a lower stress response. Your cortisol levels are lower when you're really clear about who you are. So that is one wonderful reason to really connect with your values.
Yeah, that's incredible. Because I was reading the beginning of your book, I kept thinking about, what do we take for granted what do we take for granted that's true about defiance if we kind of came up in, because I'm thinking about this through the lens of organizing. Yes. And so I'm what do I take for granted about defiance as someone who kind of came up in protest culture, came of age inside of a period where I was politicized into a moment where there was a lot of mass civil disobedience happening. And I don't take the same kinds of physical risks now as a single mom that I took when I was in my late teens, early 20s. But that was kind of my, the root system and some of my root experiences in movement were participating in mass civil disobedience. And it's such a different context in which to experience defiance because it's shared, because it's where I'm showing up to engage in a particular type of defiant behavior where the risk of the defiant act is shared amongst a whole group of people at the same time, and that's we're practicing safety in numbers, or practicing sharing the risk of the defiance, knowing that even inside of that, there's some of us who are going to get pulled out, arrested, targeted. Some people are going to have, based on where you ended up in the protest route. Yeah. you might end up having a different experience, right? But it's interesting to think about the current political moment and the types of defiance that are being required of people now. And, we had a guest on the show a few months ago, Daniel Hunter, who was like talking about the importance of not obeying in advance, not complying in advance, and really like reawakening the practice of civil disobedience. But I think one of the differences now, it's been over 20 years for me since I entered movement work. And I personally feel that people are much more isolated now than they were when I entered movement. And so I think that it's easy for me to say, don't obey in advance. because I kind of came up in a political culture that was like, we don't obey. We don't fear anarchy, we invoke it. You know what I mean? Like that was the kind of the movement ethos. But that's not the time.
That's a really good point. And what I'm also really curious about, coming, from an organizational psychology point of view as well, on the individual level for both of you, I would describe you as what I call in the books of moral mavericks, people who can speak up and act when it matters.
Yes. Hell yeah, I like that.
And when I was reading that, I was like, I hope I'm a moral maverick. I do.
I would love to know a little bit more about your relationship with compliance and defiance, and how you actually manage, when we're talking about what is it that makes people actively resist defiance, how are you able to do that? I would find that fascinating. With some of the things I've spoken about, what was it that you think was the thing that really allowed you to defy and continue to allow you to defy in this way?
I feel like you should go first, Adrienne, because I heard you say at the top of the episode that you kind of identify as like, I was raised to be compliant.
Yeah, I do feel, I was like, everything you've been saying, I'm like, you're making sense of my whole life to me. Thank you. So
stop reading my diary.
So I mean, I was, oldest child in a military family and a Southern family. And so there was, for me, from a very young age, a real sense of like what being a good girl, a good daughter, a good older sister, like I really was like, it's so important that I am good and seen as good. And I remember, I have memories of like when I would get in trouble with my parents, like the only defiance I ever had was trying to convince them like I was trying to do good. Like I may have done something bad, but I was really trying to do something good. And the moments that felt most satisfying are when I was able to make them realize how good I was trying to be, like even if I did something that seemed bad. And then I remember going to college where I feel like that defiant part of me, which was already started, like probably by the 6th grade, I was like, I'm anti-authoritarian and I can feel it in my bones, but I don't know what to do with that energy. And then when I got to college, I just remember being a part of groups that were like, yeah, we can push back. But the very first time that I have a serious memory of like my own personal defiance was in an organizational context when I felt that the leader was corrupt. And I had to stand in front of the board of an organization that I deeply cared about and deeply loved and felt a lot of belonging in. And I had to risk my belonging and kind of break my own heart in a way to say, I really see that this person is corrupt. And if we follow this pathway, it will only lead to corruption. Yeah. But then the cortisol thing you spoke about, right? Like the peace that it brought me to have said the truth and been like, I see the truth and you guys can't convince me that that's a lie is the truth. And I walked away from it with my head held high. And over the years, that feeling has become so familiar, that feeling in my gut, that feeling up my spine. It's really embodied where I'm like, this is wrong. And I have to say what's right. And it may cost the relationship, but it'll be a worthwhile expenditure.
Yeah.
Because it'll bring me more in contact with myself. And I have no regrets in that regard.
Yeah.
Like I feel like when I look back at the places where I have stepped into that, it has always caused more relaxation, less anxiety, less internal discord.
Yes.
You know, like when I'm feeling internal like storms, it's because I haven't spoken the thing that I know needs to be spoken. And I now I have very low tolerance for that inner storming.
That storming, yeah.
Right. Now it's like, as soon as I feel that, I'm like, okay, I've got to, you know, so this past year and a half, speaking up on behalf of Gaza feels like the most recent example of this, where I was like, I feel this in my gut. I know that I should be quiet according to all these people who are like, well, your funding and your livelihood and like you rely on colleges to have you come speak to them. And like, you're really going to fuck yourself up if you do this. And then this other feeling of like, it is very clear to me that something wrong is unfolding, and it's unfolding with resources that are connected to my life. And I will not regret this expenditure.
And
right.
This is what I found in my research, like two things there. One is when you had to speak up in that organization, and you said it was an organization that you really felt a huge sense of belonging. This is what I find with so many whistleblowers, is that they're often seen as troublemakers, but they're actually the people that are taking responsibility and very much believe in the organization's mission. And that is what motivates them to do something about it, because they've really connected with that. That's one thing that
We're
came
believers.
We're believers. And you want the organization to do better. That's the whole point of speaking up. And then secondly, when you're saying about sort of the tension aspect, which I described as that's the first stage of defiance, is feeling that tension. And most of us try to sweep it away. And if you do that, it doesn't go away. Actually, we try and rationalize it. The other person must know better. It's okay. But actually, it just grows. And what I see is the people that get to that final act of defiance, stage 5, when you can actually defy, that is when the tension dissipates. It melts away. And that is, you know, when you have less regret. You have regret if you don't do the thing that aligns with your values. And there's lots of costs for that compliance that we don't think about. We just think about the costs of defiance. But if you can get to that final stage 5, that tension just melts away. And that's really a positive outcome for so many people, even if there are consequences of defying. Let's not forget the consequences of complying.
I love that.
Wow. Yo, that's such a bar.
Autumn, can you tell us some of your defiance?
Yeah, I can. I really want to get to these stages of defiance because I'm really fascinated by it. But I can talk about because I think I am one of those weirdos that is not most people, but is where I feel like it is my personality. Because
so tell me how you were raised.
Because I mean, I was raised in the same family as Adrian, obviously, but I'm the youngest. And which I'm sure is a factor in all of this. I think like I had sort of I think you would say it's true too, Adrian, that like one of the things that's kind of weird about me that has always been the case since I was old enough to talk is that I'm just honest, almost to a fault. Like almost to a fault. I don't have like, I have, it's like I'm missing some chip that would like support me to like know when not, well, yeah. I mean, yeah. And I wouldn't say, well, how do I want to talk about this? It feels complicated because there's a way that I feel like there's a way that I certainly feel that my defiance is related to my natural sort of tendency towards defiance is related to my racial identity development because I feel like I just like grew up in a body that like was experienced as defiant by other people. Do you know what I mean? Like it's sort of like because I defied expectations and defied categorization and like I would just move around in the world kind of, and people would I experienced that people would often experience me as I'm defying whatever the norms that are here.
Yeah.
And then I kind of had to like grow towards that in a way in order to be like, okay, yeah, I mean, cool. Here we are. I'm defiant.
Yeah.
And then I think I also had this thing of like I lacked whatever the chip is that most people have that supports you to like, you know, have discernment around what to say and what not to say. And it's something that's like equal parts, like my truth telling can be so powerful in certain situations and can also be a huge problem in other situations. Like it's not like a universal good in my life. But I will say that the piece that I've come to with it, particularly when I've been a part of groups and organizations, is that like there's just like a Cassandra element of my life where I'm like, yeah, I have foresight. I can see a lot of things that other people can't see. I will tell the truth about those things. It will often result in me not being able to stay inside of that group or inside of that space because the truth that I can see and the truth that I need to tell is not welcome or digestible by the group at that particular moment in time. And there's a way that I feel kind of on a mission or like sent, you know, to defy and challenge the norms of different spaces, even spaces that consider themselves to be very radical. I feel like I find myself like feeling like, oh, part of my like purpose in life is to come in and disrupt whatever it is that people really say that they believe about themselves and help them kind of like orient to the truth of the situation. It's not comfortable. Like it's not a comfortable role to have in a group, but that is the role I often end up having in a group.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because, I mean, you what you're saying is you have this self-concept of being defiant, and maybe some of it was, you know, from just who you are, the way you present in the world, and how other people expect it too. And I find that quite an interesting nuance with that. And one of the things that you don't seem to suffer from, and I've met a few people that don't suffer from this is something I really suffer from, is a psychological process that I call insinuation anxiety. So when we go back to sort of that social pressure to comply, one of the main reasons that we comply is that we don't want to send a negative signal to someone else, for many of us. So, for example, there's a scenario that was described in a book called How Professors Think that really stayed with me because I have been in so many faculty meetings now at this point. And this scenario was of it was a Black woman. She was part of this committee with all other senior white men, and she was junior. And this committee was a grants committee. So they were evaluating who should receive a grant and who shouldn't based on certain qualifications, credentials, the quality of the application. And she was saying when it came to one particular applicant who was a Black man, she felt the conversation changed and that they were making the decisions from gossip, negative gossip, rather than focusing on the credentials and the quality of the application. And when she left that meeting, she said, the one thing that I could not do is what I wanted to do. And that is just to challenge them. But having met all four of these people for the first time, I didn't want to question their integrity. So this is classic insinuation anxiety, that we don't want to imply that somebody else lacks integrity. We don't want to insinuate that they can't be trusted, that they're unethical, that they're biased, that they're corrupt, that they're incompetent. We just don't want to do that. So it's kind of the other direction to social anxiety. So a lot of people understand social anxiety as, oh, we're going to give a performance. You're really worried about how you are going to be judged. But insinuation anxiety is not wanting to send a negative signal to someone else because you want to save their face. And what I find so fascinating about that, especially in the situations like I just described, is that we want to save the face of the other person. We don't want to imply that they lack integrity. But in order to do that, we actually disintegrate some of our integrity by doing so. And I
true.
think, with the fact that you're saying, oh, you're honest to a fault, or you have to be honest, is that you're not willing to sacrifice that integrity. And that becomes at the forefront of your mind, rather than what negative signal am I implying about someone else.
Yeah, I would say that tracks for me. I would say that I do feel the tension that I feel if I know something is, and I haven't said it or made to feel like it's not okay to say. I find that intolerable. Like I can't, I can't sit on something that I know, and I would say again, it makes me kind of an unpopular colleague. But I will never hesitate to point out a lack of integrity in a colleague. Not because I think that person as a person lacks integrity, but because if they exhibit a behavior that lacks integrity, I'm like, oh, in my brain, I'm like, oh, I'm sure you would want to know.
It's like you've got spinach in your teeth, dear. You've
Right.
got
I'm like,
spinach in your teeth.
I'm sure you would want to know that you just did this thing that lacked integrity so that you can correct it. And it's not it's usually, sometimes it's welcome, but it's usually not. And, but I love knowing that there's language for this, the insinuation anxiety.
And some people are very, like I used to feel it a lot. It used to keep me very silent that, if I say something, then it implies the other person is sort of sexist or racist or something. And people really hate that, and it's...
It's also like, Sunita, you're making me think about it as an intergenerational study, right? That I'm like, so many of our cultures, particularly those of us who are from communities of color, communities that have been oppressed, communities that have had to find right relationship with people who are colonizing or dominant in some way. There's so much about the culture that gets developed.
Yes.
That is, we cannot insinuate that we think that they're bad, or that we think that they're doing something wrong. We can't even insinuate that, because we will be punished for that insinuation, and how that then moves in so deeply to us that it feels like, oh, this is actually the right way to be. This is the Christian way to be, or this is a holy way to be. Or like this is what
we're protecting somebody else's feelings.
We're protecting someone else's feelings. And, I think of it intergenerationally in our family, that I can feel that, like, in our parents, often there's so much care about, like, how is this going to land on someone else? Both my parents think a lot about, how is this going to land? How will someone else feel about if I say it this way versus that way? And they really think about that, and that moved through us. But then I feel like my sister Autumn here is raising kids who have been raised with that honesty as a default practice. And so when we're all together, you can feel the generations of us trying to take care of each other, be loving, be good to each other, but how the honesty feels so jarring for half the people, and how the that insinuation, stuff feels so jarring for the other, right? So it's just like, I can see it all so much more clearly through this lens. And it's delightful, actually.
Yeah.
To be like, look at it, humans. We're so precious. We do want to hear the 5 stages of defiance.
So the first one, as I've mentioned, is tension. And instead of sweeping it away and thinking that it's not worth our time or our energy, we want to actually think about it. And stage 2 is just acknowledging it to yourself. So not disregarding it, but saying, there's something I'm uncomfortable with, and just admitting that to yourself. This is uncomfortable. It's not okay. And that is quite a powerful thing to do, and actually quite difficult for a lot of people to acknowledge, because a lot of people think that just disregarding their tension, they're working through it, but they're not. They're simply ignoring it. And so stage 2 is acknowledge that tension. Then stage 3, this is actually a really critical stage, and that is vocalizing that tension to somebody else. So that external vocalization. And this stage is a really critical one for a number of reasons. So first of all, if you can get to this stage, the research shows you're more likely to get to stage 5, because as soon as you tell someone else that you're uncomfortable with this, you've put it out there, and you can't go back and say, actually, you were fine with it. This is what you wanted to do anyway. So you're going to have too much cognitive dissonance. So you've said it. I'm uncomfortable with this. Or you're asking clarifying questions, such as, what do you mean? Have you considered this? And in this stage, you're actually still in a subservient position, right? You don't need to be confrontational. You could just be curious, and you're asking some clarifying questions. And what's great about that is that clarifying questions raise the volume on the situation. So if, for example, in that committee meeting, when somebody is saying something that could be maybe racist, you can just learn that script. What do you mean by that? Or did you just say this? And then you're raising the volume on the situation. Not only that, other people have heard you say that too. And that changes the water a little bit in which they're all swimming. They're less likely to do that kind of thing next time you're in a room together. Maybe less likely to do it even with the other people present in the room, because this has already been questioned. So that's stage 3, just simply saying you're uncomfortable with this or asking some clarifying questions is a critical one. And we can practice and we can learn how to do that. And then stage 4 is the stage where you are actually saying you're not going to comply, that you're not going to go along with it. And you just need to stick to that, because people might put pressure on you to change your mind and things like that. But it's just saying, no, you can't do that in this situation. And then you get to stage 5, which is the act of defiance. And that's when the tension dissipates and you feel proud and that you managed to act in alignment with your values.
I love that.
That's beautiful.
That feels so clear.
And you don't actually need to experience all the stages in a certain way. Sometimes you can jump from stage 2 to stage 5 when things become a lot more natural to you. You've acknowledged it immediately there. And that comes with practice. Sometimes you can go back and forth. So when I was learning how to defy, I would get to maybe asking a question, but then quickly backing down again, So, and then afterwards I would feel that tension still there and regret, and I would ruminate on it. But that's also a good thing, because we don't need to get it right every single time. If you think about like sort of even famous acts of defiance, like Rosa Parks saying no on the bus, it's always preceded by many moments of compliance. If we really think about it, how many times have you complied before? And so just because you've complied doesn't mean it's too late. You can defy the next time. You can learn, you can practice, you can think about what your aspirational self, what does a person like me do in a situation like this? And then we can get to that stage 5.
Right. And rumination in a way is its own kind of natural consequence that can support learning.
Oh, yes. Yes.
It's interesting. I'm thinking back on the story that you related about this test that you put your students through with the Falcon and the Firefly, these like fake vehicles that are like getting ready to race. And then there are engineers working on one of the vehicles that are like, we think that this isn't actually safe. We don't know, but we're not sure. And you ask your students like, would you go forward with the race or not? And then the ones who say yes, you're like, congratulations. You just, these were exactly the conditions under which the Challenger exploded. And then you go on to tell this story about the engineers who tried to raise the alarm about the Challenger and how their alarm was suppressed. And I wonder, as you're talking about the like reaching stage 5 and knowing, being able to know that you did everything you could. I wonder about how does defiance sit in relationship to those kinds of instances where, those engineers tried to defy NASA and were unsuccessful. And then their defiance was suppressed. And then, and then this horrible tragedy happened that they ultimately, it sounds like, still feel very responsible for, even though they tried to stop it.
They never regretted not speaking up. They do sort of think, is there anything else I could have done? There was so much pressure for them to reverse their decision. And it was very hard to, if they had a veto vote, to sort of say anything. There was one particular moment where NASA had said something to, one of, it's time to put your management hat on now. Whatever that means, right? Not be an engineer, but put your management hat on. And what does that mean? Like risk-taking, playing with people's lives. And they did have some consequences for speaking up, even though it wasn't effective in stopping the launch. Some were blacklisted, some resigned, some retired. But a lot of what I see when I present my students with these cases is I ask them, first of all, to make an individual decision. And here we see a mixture of people saying yes and people not feeling comfortable to say yes, so they say no. But as soon as you get into the group decision-making process, and they're now like, okay, there's going to be only one spokesperson, and you're going to give me the decision of the group. What do I see? Are you going to race or not? Yes, 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 yes. Pretty much every group is saying yes. And the people that wanted to say no they're either outvoted or they get pressured into turning it around. So I will ask them, what is your group decision from the spokesperson? And then I'll ask, what was the split? Did you convince everyone? And sometimes no, there's somebody that still remains as a dissenter, but their voice is no longer heard because the vocal person who is the spokesperson is going to say, yes, we'll launch. Yeah.
Wow. This brings it home to this moment, right? Which is like, we're in this political moment where our whole world is in need of defiance, like many, many acts of defiance. And you point out in the book that defiance isn't just about protest and civil disobedience, which I think is often what comes to mind, but it's these internal processes of change. And these internal processes of change that allow us to be brave in a myriad of different conditions. And I'm thinking about park workers, park rangers. I'm thinking about government workers and USAID workers and air traffic control workers right now. And just all these people who are in positions where it's like, my job is a life or death position, and I'm being given orders or being given instruction or being pushed to make decisions that I know will lead to death or harm or something that is really out of integrity for me. So we wonder what advice you would give to people who want to defy orders that they know are wrong and are scared to do so because of the impact it'll have on their lives and livelihoods.
Yeah, so there's many different ways to defy, and we have to do what is unique to us, right? We can all defy in our own way. So I think the first step is really, thinking about what's keeping them, really identifying that, which, we haven't spoken a lot about that sort of second question in the Defiance Compass, which is what type of situation is this? And the two key questions that people really ask within institutions or sort of organizations when there's specific rules or, a specific type of culture is the two main questions they're asking when they're making the decision to defy or not is it safe and will it be effective? So will it have positive impact? And that doesn't mean that the answer to those questions always has to be yes, because people will defy, it's never going to be completely safe. It's never going to be completely risk-free. And some people, we mentioned Rosa Parks. Was it safe for her? No. I mean, she received death threats and a huge amount of consequences for that saying no on the bus. And so some people will defy when it isn't safe and without knowing how much positive impact it's going to take. So these are very deeply personal questions. But they are useful questions to ask, as long as we're not going to rationalize, it's not safe or it's never going to be effective. We just need to ask, is it safe enough for me? Is it effective enough for me? And that is a personal question. And if we get back to connecting with our values and our responsibilities and what type of person is it, if the thing that is holding you back is the ability to defy, then you can work on that. You can work on practicing how you're going to do it. Once you've made the decision to defy, don't let the ability and the practice aspect let you down. So that is something that we see a lot, is that people want to, they just don't know how to. And that's when you can really learn, right? So that's what I'm hoping with my book, and is to make Defiance accessible to everyone. And so we don't want to just have these knee-jerk reactions. We want to go into value-driven defiance that can be quite strategic once we understand how can we define.
Really gorgeous thinking. Thank you for this.
Beautiful.
Shake these bones, oh, we're gonna shake these bones, oh,
Well, as we head into our credits, I just want to say, Sunita, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Truly.
Thank you for sharing all of these lessons and all of this wisdom with us.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I've truly enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
you.
I feel like I've been thinking new thoughts for the last 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to our show. We're on Instagram at End of the World PC and on Blue Sky as ourselves.
You can make a sustaining donation to our show by visiting our page at patreon.com/endoftheworldshow.
Another thing you can do to help our show sustain itself is to write us a review on Apple Podcasts if you're an iPhone person. This helps people looking for good new content to find us. Thank you.
Our show is produced and edited by the very defiant Zach Rosen. And transcripts are in our show notes and on our website at endoftheworldshow.org.
Music for today's show comes from Tunde Alaniran and the Banksons.
See you next time. Stand up to something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
Thank you so much, Sunita.
Yay! Thank you so much.